Hello, and welcome to Self-Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We're a podcast that's here to generate and share self-care ideas with each other. Last episode was all about selling yourself on yourself and switching your default mindset of what's wrong or what you're not good at to how amazing you are and how much you deserve the time to get that self-care today. I really hope that you understand and that you embrace that no matter what you've done today or what you haven't been able to do, you still deserve to take time for self-care and make you the priority. I want to give you a quick preview of what to expect from today's show. Today, I want to talk about pattern interrupting and give you some really awesome tips on how to interrupt that kind of default thinking that we've been talking about, that sort of like autopilot that you might be stuck on, so that you can really cultivate some more intentionality into your life. That way you can get back what's being siphoned away from you, all that time that's being fed into other places that it doesn't need to be. We're working on switching up your current pattern so that you can have a better, more positive experience in life and counteract a lot of that real dark and negative stuff that we're all being saturated with. But first, a few quick housekeeping notes. Let's get to today's content. I got a lot to go through, so I want to hustle through it. If you find that I talk too fast for your taste, always remember you can change the settings on your podcast app to slow me down, speed me up, or skip if it's not for you. Please honor yourself. Right now in the world, there's a lot of negativity going on. And a lot of people I've been talking to feel like, what's the point? It's all going to burn down anyways, right? And I've been hearing that from a lot of people, that they feel that there's like really no point in striving for anything or doing our daily routines. Because, the plane is crashing into the mountain and everything's going to shit. So it all feels super pointless. And I absolutely validate that. And I understand that thinking. It's totally valid. That's real for some people, especially my younger friends out there. You have every right to be feeling that right now. I get it. But what I want you to do today is just to offer you a little bit of a different way, a little bit of a lifeline or some hope, if you will, so that if you're feeling like this, if you feel like you don't want to do anything anymore, because you can't get out of your head about all the negativity, I want you to really tune into today's topic and listen to it and find some good tips for yourself, because this is an interesting concept. I actually learned this from a different podcast. I'll have it in the show notes. The name of the podcast escapes me right now. If you know me, I love podcasts. I listen to bunches of them. I've shared with you some of my favorites, but constantly listen to podcasts. So I will put this in the show notes where I got this information originally. But basically, what I want to get across today is that whatever you focus on, where your focus goes, your energy flows. That's where your attention is going to go. And that's so important, because if you're in that headspace of everything's burning down and there's no point and I don't want to do anything or try to make anything or try to be better or any of that, because it feels true that everything is on fire and the entire world is focused on it all burning down. So, it's about to get hot in here, right? Like everything's burning down. And if that's what you're thinking about, if that's where your headspace is, that's what you're going to find more evidence of. Just like we talked about in the last episode, when you start thinking about yourself in a shitty way or you start putting yourself down for something, your brain is going to automatically look for evidence to prove that true. And it's the same with the world around you. When you feel like, oh my God, everything is going to hell in a handbasket and there's really no point in, going back to school or writing that book or losing the weight or doing any of these things, because what's the point? It's all going to burn, right? And all I'm saying is, sure, that is probably true and that maybe feels true for you, but can we do something to change our attitude and change our focus to help ourselves feel better. Because thinking about the world burning down and thinking about it being pointless or thinking shitty thoughts about yourself, while it may feel super, super true, it's not the only truth. And I want you to hear me say that again. Feels like the world's burning down to the ground, the late stage end of capitalism. It's all going to hell. And something else could be true. Something really good could also be true. And that's what we're going with today. So what we're doing today, we're talking about the pattern interrupt skill. And this is a way to change any habit or behavior that you're working with that you'd like to change. So if you find yourself really thinking about the worst case scenario a lot, especially with everything in the news media and what's going on, this is a really good practice to learn now so that when it all goes to shit, you have the skills available to roll with those punches and use the fire hose on the fire that's right next to you. You know what I mean? To protect yourself. So if you joined me for the last episode, when I was talking about our brains and how they're wired to find what's wrong and they're looking for all that supporting evidence to prove that true. If we want to, we can work with our busted ass brain and tweak it to work it differently. And to that, like focus it and purposefully direct it in a different direction than it was before in order to get it to work for you. And surprisingly, it doesn't take that much work. I mean, if you want to be stuck in that, we're all going to die mode, that is absolutely your choice. But again, I'd rather look for ways to maybe try to save the ship before it sinks. And look for what could work, what could be good about this inevitable demise. At least, because I just feel like humans are so resourceful and we're so brilliant. And somebody out there could come up with the amazing game plan at the last second to really turn this all around. And I believe in that. I believe that there is some young kid out there with the solution to the plastic problem. And I believe that there is some sort of positivity happening to the collapse of capitalism. There's something better on the other side. That's what I believe. And even if that doesn't feel tangibly true to you, I want to at least show you how you can interrupt the patterns that you might be kind of hardwired to at least add to these negative thoughts and this negative information that you're being surrounded with. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn about pattern interrupting skills. Now, if you want a masterclass on this, you can, Google it and educate yourself. But today is just kind of a brief overview. We're just going to kind of skim the surface. We're going to talk about how you can use this pattern interrupt process to actually get more self-care and to get better self-care. And if you're already checking out and saying, you know what, Chris, I don't have any patterns. I have no idea what I'm doing one day to the next. It's all crazy town. And that's awesome. If that's your life, great, good for you. A pattern interrupt could be actually creating some routines. So just start kind of where you're at in your head. And in the next couple of days, work with these pattern interrupt skills. Look to see if you can find examples of other people using pattern interrupt skills. And we'll talk about language and all the different ways that you can find these skills in and around your everyday life. But if you already know that you're kind of on autopilot with life, let's get into learning this pattern interrupt skills to your advantage. So first of all, and this goes with anything new that you're working with, you've got to learn to recognize your own patterns. Now, this is a bit of work. I'm not going to lie. You're going to have to, do a little introspective work. But what you're going to do is step outside yourself for just a moment and observe. Now, don't judge. We're not doing any of that shame shawl shit. I just want you to observe with genuine curiosity what you're doing in your life day to day, over and over. What patterns are you in, and which ones do you think you currently want to break or that you're not benefiting from? The best examples for most of us are too much social media, mindlessly eating, complaining about our jobs all the time, self-deprecating. That's a huge pattern that I see a lot of people like entrenched in. I'm sure that you can find some example, but just start out by looking at your own patterns and recognizing, and just decide if this is a good pattern or a bad pattern. Now, I just said don't judge yourself, and I don't want you to judge yourself. I don't mean like, what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong kind of judge. I mean, is it a pattern you want to keep doing, or is it a pattern you want to switch? Let's say it's smoking cigarettes. You want to quit smoking cigarettes. Like, first you have to notice, how many cigarettes are you smoking in a day? How many times do you reach for a cigarette? What makes you reach for a cigarette? All right, I know a lot of us don't smoke cigarettes anymore. It's kind of an older person thing, but I really want you to think about it in those terms. When you're thinking about like recognizing your own patterns, think about the things you're doing over and over and over again, sort of mindlessly, that sometimes maybe feel like you don't have control over them. So that's the first step, is you're going to recognize your own pattern. Next up, step number 2, you're going to set yourself up to be led. So once you've determined what these patterns are, you start thinking about this autopilot stuff. I want you to start setting yourself up to be led away from the pattern. Now, notice how I'm not suggesting you jump ship and delete all of your social media apps or throw your pack of cigarettes, in the garbage, or clean out the fridge or quit your job. No. I want you to set yourself up for an interrupt, and it has to be subtle and slight and realistic. So, if you notice, for example, that your pattern that you want to change is that you're on social media too much, it's eating up all your free time, and that's why you don't have any time for self-care. Now, don't get me wrong. Scrolling is absolutely a form of disassociation and self-care. I totally promote it, but too much is not a good thing. And I want to address that. If you're wanting to be led away from that pattern, you're going to have to do little things. Like you can put the time limits on the social media things, or you can actually turn that phone off. I know it's hard to remember that the phone has an off button, but you can turn that phone off. And to tie this into self-care, if you don't have a self-care pattern, you currently don't do self-care at all, and the only time you think about it is like when you go through a breakup or some kind of rock bottom, or you're so burned out and so hyperstimulated that you can't stand it and you have to recluse for a few days. So if that's your current pattern, what the pattern interrupt, setting yourself up to be led away from that, would be small little things. Tiny little things like making an appointment for self-care. Yes, I mean making an appointment for self-care. Put it on your calendar. Block it off as an hour. Take a day off from work and just call it your self-care day. And that's the day that you once a month you make a nail appointment or a massage appointment, or, purposely do some journaling or thinking of yourself, or cover yourself in those flash tattoos and lay out in the sun so you get really fun tan marks. I don't know. Whatever the thing you do for self-care, you've got to lead yourself towards that by setting up little help along the way. Next, what you're going to do is the actual interrupting. Now, this is the important part. This is the meat and potatoes part. This is what you came for. You're going to do something completely not related, and this is going to sound super strange. Don't get me wrong. I know before I even say this next part how absolutely fucking ridiculous I'm about to sound. But trust me, I promise you, I've been doing this for a while. It actually works. But you're actually going to create your interrupt, and it has to be something a little bit ridiculous, because your habit brain is so entrenched in its pattern that it needs something to actually interrupt it. And you got to do something wacky, unrelated, right at the very moment that you notice you're in your default pattern. So some examples are like jumping up and down, or singing, or clapping your hands, or dancing wildly, or counting. I've even heard of people doing push-ups or burpees, like whatever it takes, an actual physical movement, something that you don't do very often, and you're going to do it the very second you recognize you're engaged in the pattern. And you might be like, Chris, this is stupid. I'm not going to stop scrolling my Facebook and do a bunch of push-ups. That's